and welcome to the 2021 Eastern New Mexico Military University, Eastern New Mexico University Veterans Day Celebration. I'm Ron Hodnett, and I have been blessed with not only serving as your military outreach coordinator, but also for your MC for this event. We're scheduled this event to recognize and honor the veteran population here at Eastern New Mexico University. I want to take a few minutes to welcome our distinguished guests this morning. Chancellor Caldwell, Dr. Robert Snyder, Benito Gonzalez, and I had scheduled my daughter remotely. She's active duty Air Force, but we had some technical difficulties and was not able to get her upload. And so I asked one of our other guests, Airman First Class Ashley Orozco, to stand in, and she graciously accepted. So we'll have her fill in for Lieutenant Kristen Rowe. I also want to welcome our other guests, Eastern New Mexico veteran students and family members, both active and reserve. And I think we have members of the Portales Military Affairs Committee, PMAC. And I want to give a special thank you to all of the sponsors and supporters from the Clovis and Portales area. If I have forgotten anyone, please blame my mind and not my heart. To start our event, I would now ask the color guard to present the colors, but before they come out, please stand for presenting the colors. Color guard, please present the colors.
Present, pause. Port. Pause. Colors, colors turn, heart.
Please be seated. At this time, we have the Eastern New Mexico band that will play the national anthem for us. my honor and privilege to introduce our first speaker this morning. Please join me in giving her a warm welcome to today's ceremony, Chancellor Patrice Caldwell.
Thank you, and good morning. Welcome to everyone. I appreciate your being here, and I especially appreciate the time you've taken to make this important recognition for those who have given their all, or a major part of their lives, to the armed services of the United States of America. I want to thank Cannon Air Force Base Color Guard for being with us this morning. I'd like to thank Dr. Stephen Gamble, Lieutenant Colonel, retired of the Air Force, for joining us, as well as all of you. I appreciate the musical excellence of our musicians and other students, staff, faculty who have helped create this, and particularly Mr. Ron Hodnett, who has done a wonderful job putting this event together. I appreciate the speakers who will be giving us their insights later in this presentation. I also wish to, it's very hard to read here, there's very little light, I'm sorry. I would like to recognize another event that's occurring downtown at the same time. The American Legion is holding their celebration, and I regret that these events overlap. In particular because two of the speakers are very near and dear to the heart of Eastern New Mexico University, former professor Andy Nazario, and alumnus and Air Force Colonel retired Michael Woolley. They're also recognizing Mr. Clarence Thompson and former ENMU employee, Mr. Al Bachicha. I think if you don't know Al Bachicha, you probably know one of his numerous offspring who have attended Eastern. So if we were not here, I suspect we would all be there. Veterans Day in the United States commemorates, as I know you all know, the armistice that began the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th month of 1918. The armistice agreement was signed in a very rough little forest in northern France. The pictures show that the trees were blasted and dying, but within a year they were all green. The pictures of that very small little village and the forest surrounding it, where this railroad car was situated and the armistice was signed, remind me of another area in our country's history, and that is the site of Arlington National Cemetery. Some of you probably know that Arlington Estate originally was the property of our first president, George Washington, and it was the desire of his grandson to donate that Arlington Estate to the country in memory of his grandfather, George Washington. He left the estate to his daughter, Mary Curtis Lee, who was the wife of Robert E. Lee, and the family would have passed that estate on to the United States at their death. But the Civil War broke out in 1861, and the Union Army took over Arlington Estate, set up 3 forts, which were later removed. But as any of you who have visited Arlington National Cemetery know, the heights of Arlington Estate are directly overlooking Washington, D.C. And so it was a strategic high ground for protecting Washington, and that was the purpose of the Union troops taking that position. Of course, the Lees never returned to Arlington. But Arlington became a national cemetery in 1864, and of course, the preeminent national cemetery for veterans and their designated dependents. I mentioned this fact, or these 2 important events in the history of this particular day, for a couple of reasons. The first is that there are far too many battlefields in our world today, but they were once all fields. There are far too many military cemeteries all over the world, but they were once villages and forests and farms. And there are far too many servicemen and women who are asked to give that last full measure, or so much of it that they are changed forever because of that great gift. And even though we cannot ask them not to make that gift, we certainly can resolve here never to forget that and never to cease to honor it. I hope that in the world that we live in today, there will be fewer deadly conflicts and there will be only a very slow growth of military cemeteries. But be that as it may, we have a solemn debt of honor to the people who served in the armed forces for the United States, and I think we are very proud to honor them today. And I thank you for doing that at this event, and I thank you for your presence here today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chancellor Norwell. I also have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Robert Schneider. Dr. Schneider is also a retired Army veteran, and he currently serves as the Dean of the Eastern New Mexico University College of Business. Dr. Schneider.
Y'all are in trouble because I'm the only person that doesn't have to wear a mask. The longer I stay up here, the longer I can go without a mask. Thank you, Ron. You've done a good job. Ron, for those of you that don't know, Ron hasn't been here that long. And he clearly hit the ground running. And that's kind of one of the things I'm going to get to and want to talk about is the difference between veterans and the rest of the people in the world in general. But first, let me say, my name is Bob Schneider, and I was in the Army for 20 years and 14 days on purpose. And I started out as a combat medic and did some behavioral science stuff, and I was a drill sergeant, a first sergeant, all kinds of other stuff. So I had a lot of fun over 20 years and a lot of good memories, just like many of you have. I went in 1982 and retired in 2002. So, like I said, exactly 20 years. It was a different time, obviously. The majority of that was Cold War stuff. And by the way, that's a war we won, for those of you that don't like to remember that. You know, we like to list the ones we didn't do so well at, but I think we still clicked the Cold War in the win column, if I remember correctly. So let's not forget that. Sorry, rabbit hole. Thank you for being here. Everybody has something else they could be doing. Everybody else has something that might even be more important than this in somebody else's eyes. But you saw it to be important enough to be here. And that speaks volumes. Those of us that have been in the military, we hear a lot, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's pretty easy to roll off the lips. Those Vietnam vets didn't hear a lot of that in the 1970s. But nowadays, it's fashionable to be pro-military, especially in parts of the world like where we live. Maybe there's some other parts where not so much, but here it is. But you folks are doing something that means something. You're taking time out of your day to appreciate, and that's just a little bit more than just saying thank you for your service. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time and the effort to be here. All right, all that being said, what I kind of like to talk a little bit about today and intertwine a couple of stories maybe, is the difference between veterans and other folks. But I want to start by making sure everybody understands the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. All right, I'm sorry, most of you already do, I'm sure, but for that one or two that may not, I think it's worth the conversation. All right, raise your hand if Veterans Day is for you. Raise your hand if Memorial Day is for you. There you go, get the difference. Memorial Day is for people that gave their life for our country, okay? So they're not here to honor, we honor the memory of them. Veterans Day are people that you can touch, see, feel, all right? They're the people that you can still talk to. I heard somebody say something the other day that was kind of disturbing, and they said if we took every empty housing unit in the United States, we would be able to put 10 times the number of homeless vets that we have into those buildings. All right, so there's a lot of vets out there that could use a hand, can use help. You know, we have a homeless veterans organization in Clovis. Mr. Knight is back there. He's, I don't know if he's still the president of it, or the chairman. Yeah, he's nodding his head. So, I mean, there are efforts in the community that you can get involved in if you're interested. There's veteran service organizations that you can be part of, and all the veterans know that. But even as a non-veteran, there are things you can do, like coming to stuff like this, that is appreciated. All right, so the difference. Why is there no apostrophe in veterans? Why is it not apostrophe? Here's your useless trivia for the day. Nobody knows. But there is no apostrophe. What do you think there, sorry?
It's incorrect grammar. The apostrophe should be after the S.
Yeah, I know, if it was correct, but they have purposely omitted. If you go to the VA website, you go to any Veterans Day, even the History Channel, all that kind of stuff, they all mention the fact that the apostrophe is not there on purpose. So, all right, if you ever have a trivia question, what is the one intentional grammatical error that our country has authorized? I guess it's the missing apostrophe in Veterans Day. So if you're ever on Jeopardy. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers isn't the one hosting. All right, difference between a veteran and a non-veteran. Nothing. Experience. What does that experience do to a veteran? What does the experience do to a veteran? All right, I think one of the things that I've found with most veterans, there's exceptions to everything, is veterans have a higher level of gratefulness. It's rare that I've met a veteran that's not grateful. They will talk about how grateful they are for the friends that they met in the military, for their God, for their country, for their family. All right, it's interesting to me the lack of gratefulness that I come across in the non-military community. There's exceptions, of course, always. Right? And on both sides. But I think that gratefulness drives veterans to do things without even considering cost. If you're grateful for your country that you were able to grow up in, then volunteering to potentially give life limb for that country isn't a big deal. The same with family or friends. You know, you hear stories of people say, I didn't, you know, once I went to war for the United States, but once I got there, I was fighting for the guy or the gal next to me. And we were keeping each other alive. So it's that level of gratefulness, being grateful for that person next to you, being grateful for that mother, father, country, neighbor, whoever you have, was something that I was always amazed with in my 20 years in the military. All right, we'd be in the, you know what, the S word, and people would be joking, and people would be laughing, and people would be talking about, you know, when I grew up, this, or when I grew up, that. Or I remember my drill sergeant when he did this. And it didn't matter that you were freezing. You know, it was 5 below zero in Hohenfels, Germany, and we were getting up to walk the border in the morning. Didn't matter. Or it didn't matter that you're in Afghanistan and it's 120 degrees, and no matter how much water you drink, you still can't pee because of how much you're sweating. Right? But you're still laughing, you're still with your friends, and you're still grateful. The ability to be grateful no matter what's going on around you by not losing your memories of that stuff that grounds you, your parents, your God, your country. That's what veterans understand. All right, there's some other populations that have a good grasp of that. I mean, there's probably some law enforcement people that understand that kind of feeling and camaraderie and gratitude. There are other people who never had anything to do with it, who are just kind of wired that way, except there's always exceptions. But I just wanted to point out, as a group, I think the thing that veterans have more than anybody else is that gratefulness. No matter what's going on around us, we have that ability to snap back, or we will snap each other back to a point of remembering to be grateful for what we have, not what we don't have. I want to make the point that not all veterans are heroes. All right, not all veterans are even very nice people. Okay, just because somebody was in the military doesn't mean any of those things. Now, many veterans are nice people. Many veterans are heroes at some level. But I worked at Leavenworth for 4 years. I was the senior medic at the penitentiary at Leavenworth, the military side. And at the time, there were 1,200 military people incarcerated there who probably wouldn't be classified by anybody as heroes. All right? Even though they were a lot like you and me. I mean, they just made a mistake or whatever, some of them were legitimately bad people. But it really diminishes the heroes when you call us all heroes. I know some people who went through some really bad stuff. Really bad stuff. I went through some stuff, but I wouldn't say really bad. So those people to me are heroes. And then there's some people that went through really, really bad stuff. And to the people who went through really bad stuff, it's the people who went through really, really bad stuff who are heroes. All right, a sergeant major told me one time, be wary of people who call themselves a hero. All right, but most of us are looking to the person who did more, and that's our hero. And I would ask you to do that too. All right, just keep in mind that hero is a word that shouldn't be used lightly, shouldn't be taken lightly. The meaning is deep and thick. And for the people that are heroes, it's hurtful when it's used fortuitously. So anyway, not all vets are heroes. Why are vets successful? Well, I think it's that grateful thing, but there's also something that we learned in the military. And I have the Army specific one here, but it doesn't matter the branch. Each branch has its own flavor. And we talk about stuff like, there's an acronym in the Army called leadership, LDR, SHIP. And you know what it stands for is loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. I'm not going to go through each one of those, obviously, but you know, I'll start. I do want to talk a little bit about loyalty and duty. Loyalty is something, again, that's understated. We have a society that's been described as a disposable society, a throwaway society. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you know you hit a little rough spot, chunk the relationship and get a new one, is kind of what the culture pushes. All right, it's anti-loyalty at the core. So when we went into the military, depending on our age, some of us, the culture wasn't that much yet like that, but now it certainly is. You have to buck up against that, because the military asks you not to put yourself first. There's selfless service in here too, but I think there's a big piece of selfless service in loyalty. Because if I'm going to stay loyal to you, there's going to be times when I have to subordinate my needs to your needs. Whether you're a person, a country, an organization, whatever it is. And none of us is perfectly loyal, of course, we're all flawed. But the level of loyalty in veterans has been facilitated by their time in the military and incentivized. In the military, they incentivize loyalty. You get stuff for being loyal to your unit. Even if it's just attaboys, pat on the back, you know, whatever it is. Lots of awards, right guys? We get lots of awards in the military. Nobody more than the Air Force, though. So, all right, duty. person has a duty to do their job well, whatever that job is, whatever that vocation is, mother, father, janitor, president of a university system, or anything in between. All right, we all have a duty to do our jobs well, to do our vocations well. It's a God-given duty. That is cultivated in the military, again, with lots of awards, lots of attaboys, but with training that is above anything I've ever seen in the civilian world. I don't know, Benito, if you agree with me on this, but one of the most disappointing things to going to even, I went to a major contractor after I left the Army, and the biggest thing that was a disappointment to me is in the Army, you don't have to open that door until you've been trained on how to do it. You get trained on how to do everything. There's no assumptions. We don't assume you know anything. And in the civilian world, they let you screw it up 3 or 4 times, and then you see it on your annual appraisal, and then you got to go watch a YouTube video to figure out how to do it. So I think that level of commitment to duty and doing things well comes to veterans, and we bring that to organizations. None of this, if you notice, is internal. We don't typically bring this to our military experience. Our military experience cultivates this in us. All right, so I'm not standing up here bragging about what a great person I am or any veterans because of our doing. It's because of what was done to us in our military experience. It's something that people don't understand that haven't been in the military, and I have people look at me weird all the time. Like, why do you care? Why is it that level of caring? So we just ask to be understood, right? The whole leadership thing ends up with personal courage, and let me just jump to personal courage, the P in the leadership acronym. Do the right thing every time, all the time. Now, that's clearly a goal, something none of us could live up to every time. But if it's in the front of your mind, you're going to achieve it more often than if you don't even consider it. It bugs the crap out of me when I don't do the right thing. It bugs the crap out of me. It doesn't mean I'll go back and do the right thing. Sometimes I just live in my misery. But I know people who cannot do the right thing and it doesn't even bother them. I think this is something with the military with me. When I was a drill sergeant, we always had a saying. When I was a drill sergeant, we had a saying. And that saying was, 1,000 infractions, 1,000 corrections. Anybody ever heard that before? Yeah, you've heard that, yeah. 1,000 infractions, 1,000 corrections. If you let it go this time, you've told the person it's okay, the behavior's okay. So you make the correction every time. Why are you so critical? Why do you always want to tell me I did this wrong? No, I'm not being critical. I'm trying to be helpful so you don't continue to do it wrong. And that is another, I think, cataclysmic chasm between military thinking and civilian thinking. If I'm doing something wrong, I want somebody to tell me, Schneider, you're doing that wrong. This is the way to do it. Because I don't want to do something that's not correct, because I look stupid. I really miss that attitude, and I welcome that attitude being around veterans. It's really cool to be able to be honest with somebody. You should hear some of the conversations Benito and I have. Yeah, it's just like being back on active duty. It's really nice to be able to talk at that level and not worrying that you're hurting somebody's feelings. Just worrying about getting something right. All right, so, anyway, if you're an employer, if you're in a position to hire somebody, that's what you get when you hire a vet, more likely, more often than not. You get somebody who's grateful. You get somebody who has a sense of duty, and someone who, if they don't like working for you, they'll quit. They won't just hang around and draw a paycheck, which I think is a good thing. All right, lastly, one more thing I want to talk about, and we live in a society that's very fluid. Let me say it that way. I believe in beauty and I believe in ugliness. I believe there is beauty in the world and I believe there's ugliness in the world. Most of us have seen ugliness that have been in the military. But we've all seen beauty. All right. So to declare something worth dying for, it must be beauty. I'm not going to die for ugliness. All right. And the thing that we all start with is an oath of enlistment. And that oath of enlistment reflects back to something that I'm going to call beautiful, and it's our Constitution. It's what we swore to defend. Now, there's no expiration to that oath, by the way. There's absolutely no expiration to that oath. And it's to be defended against internal and external enemies. I would ask you all to just remember that. And let me read it really quickly. I, say your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. I took that oath every time I re-enlisted, which was, 4 or 5 times, something like that, and then initially. And every time, even now, it just put chills down my spine. The same way singing the national anthem does. The same way saying the Pledge of Allegiance does. Folks, don't believe the hype. There are beautiful things in our world. There are things worth defending in our world. There is right and there is wrong. And if we stand up, we can keep this country going. All right, so defend the beautiful, and let's try to, minimize the ugly, at least. I'm so used to asking for questions when I'm done speaking, but I don't want to do that today. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate this. Ron, outstanding job. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate you being here, and I don't know why they gave me 30 minutes and the next person 15 and the person after that 10. I have to talk to Ron about that. He hasn't been here long enough to know me, but he knows me. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Snyder. I just want a side note. When I first met with Dr. Snyder, we started talking about our military service, and we didn't realize at the time that our paths had actually crossed, and we were both stationed at or near Ramstein Air Force Base in the early 80s. And it really brought back a lot of fond memories for me, hearing him speak of his adventures there. Again, thank you very much. Our next speaker is also a veteran of the U.S. Army, Benito Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez serves as the Eastern New Mexico University System Executive Director of HR Policy and Planning. Benito.
Thank you, Ron. Great speech, Top. That was awesome. Welcome to all the veterans, families, active duty, and definitely Ron for putting this together. This is a great ceremony. He asked me to talk about my experience here today. Every veteran has their own story. So when I tell mine, I'm hoping that I can highlight some of the things that a lot of veterans went through during their time and experienced. And I also am going to throw in some figures from the VA so we get a sense of how many brave men and women have served our country. I put a little pamphlet on your table straight from the VA website as well, so you can reference that if I messed any of my numbers up. So I always wanted to serve in the armed forces. Well, I don't necessarily come from a military family per se. My great-grandfather, Sam Montoya, he served in World War I. And my late grandfather, Virgil Montoya, fought in the Korean War. So more than 5.7 million served worldwide in the Korean War era. Almost 2 million served in theater. Over 54,000 service members paid the ultimate sacrifice during that era. There are over 1 million living veterans from that war still with us today. We salute you. So I did try to enter the reserves when I first started college around 2000. And believe it or not, I failed the MEPS medical screening because I had athlete's foot of all things. So I guess as a poor college kid, you know, you can't afford that tough acting. Who knows? I don't know what happened there. But this was pre-9/11. Military was pretty picky at that time. I mean, you couldn't even have a blip on your record, a speeding ticket or anything to join it around that time. But after 9/11, I knew I was going to try again. This time I knew I was going to go all in when I graduated. And everything changed that day, right, for everybody. I remember sitting there with my lovely girlfriend at the time, thinking, what the heck just happened? Coming to class that day, I can't even believe we had class that day, but one of my professors did keep that going, and you know, it was just a really crazy day, a really eerie day, a very dark day for our nation. Soon after that, 9/11, we entered America's longest war, a nearly 2-decade-long campaign in Afghanistan. Operation Enduring Freedom. Ultimately, that changed over time to Operation Freedom Sentinel and was accompanied by the overarching global war on terrorism, which included Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation New Dawn, as well as various other missions throughout the Middle East and Africa. Almost 3 million have served in the war on terror, with nearly 7,000 paying the ultimate sacrifice. We salute you. So on that note, as you see before us over to my left, we honor the most recent 13 service members who paid the ultimate sacrifice during the Afghanistan exit here in August of this year. When the ceremony is over, I do encourage you to take some time to look at the faces of those that defend our freedom and honor and sacrifice that they made. So with that, I'd like to take just a brief moment of silence for these fallen heroes. Thank you. So after a couple years after 9/11, I was lucky enough to get married to my wonderful girlfriend that I was with that day, that I was telling you about. With her support and love, I inked my first ever free agent contract, so I went ahead and signed the dotted line. I didn't have athlete's foot anymore, thanks to her. But at that point, they were taking pretty much anybody they can get into service at that time. So, if you were willing to go, they'd sign you up. They had a lot of great benefits and things like that, and they still do. I still remember the day that I took that oath of enlistment, and the excitement, pride, and uncertainty that was to come. I knew for certain I was going to play in the sandbox. The recruiters didn't lie about that. They said, you're going. And I'm sure all you veterans of foreign wars who signed up willingly or were drafted and took that oath during wartime know the added level of uncertainty that brings. So shortly after graduating ENMU with my bachelor's in business administration, College of Business, I kissed my wife goodbye and went off to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. So as a poor kid from Colorado and New Mexico, it was one of my first ventures outside of the Southwest. We all know that old line about getting to see the world and all the things that you get to do, and that was no joke, right? I was one of the older guys who enlisted at 24, but I made it through boot camp with no issues. You know, we all have stories about the crazy drill sergeants that pushed us to our limits at times, but you definitely put in long hours, and I appreciate that. I hated the fact that I could only talk to my wife for a couple minutes every 1 or 2 weeks, but we knew what was going to happen going in. And you know, ultimately she made the trip across the country with her dad to see me graduate boot camp. That was a very special time for me. We even got to leave post for a few hours. and he even left us alone while we caught up, so that was good. I think every veteran can agree that there's no better experience than being able to come back and see your loved ones after you've been away for a while you're serving. So after boot camp, I was bused down to Augusta, Georgia, learned my job, network operator. Yes, I was a pogue, and for those of you that don't know what that means, it's a person other than a grunt. So, you know, we all play our part. But I was in the Signal Corps, baby, and I know there's a couple of people in here that are familiar with that and have been there. We made the cross-duty trip to my duty station in Fort Lewis, Washington. So there we go again, you know, traveling across the country. Being able to see beautiful places, the Great Pacific Northwest. It was awesome up there. We got to do tons of things there and did as much as we could while we were there. The first year, you know, after I got there, we got to hang out in Garrison for a year. Those guys just got back from a deployment. And that's kind of how it was. That's kind of how it was for a really long time. You go for a year, you come back a year. You go for a year, you come back a year. So after that first year, I got to go get word that we were going to deploy in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. We finished off the job of toppling Saddam Hussein, which began during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Those veterans were the first to pave the way for American missions in the Great Sandbox. There were 2.25 million serving during that era, almost 700,000 deployed to the Gulf, and nearly 2,000 service members lost their lives serving in that era. We salute you. So I got my orders and kissed my wife goodbye again and took off to Iraq. And I want to take this moment to thank my wife Jennifer, she's sitting right there, and all the other spouses and families that endured the uncertainty and all the anxiety, the pain, and the loss that service entails. We could not have done this without our loved ones. We had their support, and we, along with the country, should always be grateful for the sacrifices of our nation's greatest families. Let's give them a round of applause. So I was fortunate that my battle buddies had the experience of being in Iraq just a year prior. Most veterans and service members that served during this era, like I said, endured multiple deployments. So after circling the airport in Mosul in what felt like a crash landing, because of the maneuvers that our great Air Force pilots had to do to keep us from getting hit by rockets, I landed in Iraq. We completed our mission in Mosul, laying fiber optic cable throughout the base there and providing secure internet and phone lines to units in the field. We got used to the mortars coming in willy-nilly, you know, people just launching them off, trying to hit somebody, hoping they'd hit somebody. Got used to hearing explosions and gunfire every day and night. It was just where we were, right? We were there about 6 months. I was pretty much limited to base unless, you know, we had to do the, in HR terms, other duties as assigned and you know, do some gate guard or some of those other things. But we heard stories from outside the wire. We supported the CASH, the Combat Support Hospital, and saw a lot of people being flown in there and carted in, and you know, mostly were Iraqi civilians. We knew when somebody on the FOB from one of the units that we supported didn't come back the next day. We knew when somebody decided that they'd had enough and they took their own life. It was tough. It was tough. But there were also good times. And, you know, your battle buddies made it great, right? I mean, I'm sorry. We had the best times. We had one in forward operating base Madez. We had one of the best dining facilities in all of Iraq. Unfortunately, it's because it's the dining facility that actually got bombed. I think it was before Thanksgiving one year. It was before I even got there, but it was beautiful. I mean, you can get whatever you wanted to eat. You know, you can get breakfast, lunch, dinner as long as you made it there. but you know, we even had like steak and crab legs on some Sundays. So it was pretty awesome. I mean, we got used to, you know, living in the old buildings in the CHUs, which is a containerized housing unit, or a Connex basically. But they had air conditioning and heating if we needed it. So I think that's a far cry from what our veterans of World War II experienced in their accommodations. And we can never forget the sacrifices that of those that fought in that global battle. There were over 16 million serving worldwide during that era. Over 400,000 paid the ultimate sacrifice, and there are almost as many living veterans from that war with us today. We salute you. So you got to take a 2-week break from war when you're in the Army, and what I experienced when I flew home was one of the greatest feelings that I could ever imagine. My connecting flight landed at DFW, and when we were taxied in, there were 2 fire trucks coming along the side of the aircraft, American flags hanging down, their spouts open, washing off the plane. When we got off the plane, there were people lined up welcoming us back with their little flags, cheering us on, smiles, cheers. I was very proud to serve my country that day. I think we learned our lesson from the treatment of our soldiers in Vietnam, and there were nearly 9 million of them that served during that era. Nearly 3.5 million were deployed to Southeast Asia, and almost 100,000 made the ultimate sacrifice. We salute you. Needless to say, whatever your political beliefs are, whether or not you support a war or cause, we must always, always, always treat our veterans who serve our country with the respect and honor that they deserve. So after we completed our mission in Mosul, we were tasked with force protection in Baghdad, another one of those other duties as assigned type of deals. My squad drew the easy mission of securing Al-Fa Palace, where we got to lift the gates when General Casey and other high-ranking officials drove or walked through. So overall, my deployment was pretty good. I think as good as you can get. But I know many veterans had very different experiences. I salute and commend the combat troops, the special forces, and all the other direct combat entities out there. But us Pogues know they couldn't do it without our support. Right, Air Force? No, I'm just kidding, Ron. I gained a lot from my service, from educational to VA benefits. I got to meet a wonderful group of men and women from all walks of life. And don't forget, I got to travel a lot, right? So in closing, I just want us all to celebrate our nation's active duty and military veterans. I didn't mention facts and figures from wars past in which there were no living veterans, kind of the Memorial Day versus Veterans Day thing. But of course, we remember our history and honor their memory and their sacrifice as well. We will always remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice for our country and for our freedom. Never forget. So thank you for having me, and God bless America, and God bless our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Benito. As I mentioned earlier, I had my daughter, Second Lieutenant Kristen Rose, scheduled to do a remote presentation, but because of technical difficulties, we weren't able to get that downloaded. And so Airman First Class Orozco has agreed to give us a presentation or a short spiel about why she joined. We all have our stories, and I'd love to hear hers.
Good morning. I'm Airman First Class Orozco, and I just wanted to give you a little background on myself. I was born and raised in Peru, South America. First of all, I want to say thank you, all the veterans, for being here and for your service. Thank you for the families that always are our support, and thank you for all the active duty members and reserve in our armed forces. So I came to the United States 7 years ago. I decided to join the Air Force 2 years ago. And it was because I wanted to be part of something big and important and nothing greater than the armed forces. I wanted to help people one way or another. So it was really important for me and to have a change in my life. I wanted to, and on my personal side, like on my personal life, I wanted to have a career, I wanted to have stability in my life, and yeah, I wanted to change. I also wanted to help my family because we're immigrants, like I said before, and sometimes lives can be really hard for us. So I wanted to help them. I was only like 19, 18 at the time, and I wanted to do something for my family. And here and in Peru, so yeah, that was one of the biggest thing, one of my motives to join. And currently, I'm on the station in Cannon Air Force Base here in New Mexico. I am an intelligence analyst, and I'm working with the 56 Special Operations Intelligence Squadron. And yes, that's me. I thank you again for your service, and thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing that on such short notice. Next, I'd like to honor and recognize our fallen comrades. If you please direct your attention to the table set up to the left here. The fallen soldiers table, those who have served and those currently serving in the uniformed services of the United States are ever mindful that the sweetness of enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. They are compelled to never forget that while we enjoy our daily pleasures, others have endured or may be still enduring the agonies of pain and internment. We call attention to this small table, which occupies a place of dignity and honor. The tablecloth is white, the purity of their intentions in response to their country's call to arms. The single rose in a vase signifies the blood they may have shed for our freedom. The slice of lemon signifies their bitter fate. The salt reminds us of the many countless tears of families as they wait. The glass inverted, they can't drink with us today. The chair is empty, they are not here. Let us not forget the sacrifices of those and their families. I want to share just a little bit with you about why I joined. Between my wife and I, our immediate families, I'll say parents and our children, combined service, we have over 220 years of service. My wife has 5 brothers, and between her brothers, there's 50 years of service. My wife and I together have 51 years of service. My father spent 26 years in the service, and 2 of our children have served. And as I mentioned earlier, we currently have our oldest daughter on active duty. I joined because I admired my father so much. My most vivid memory was I was probably 4.5, 5 years old, and we had just relocated to Washington, D.C. And I saw my father climbing out of the car in his uniform. Now my father's only 5'7", but at that time, I thought he was 7 feet tall coming up that driveway. I couldn't wait to join the military. And I never even told my wife this, but I have a superpower. And that superpower is I'm the son of a soldier. You learn to improvise, adapt, and overcome every time you move. You're always willing, as Dr. Snyder and Benito mentioned, you're ready to do whatever's necessary based on what you're asked to do. It has been a pleasure for me to serve, and the main reason I'm standing here today is because the military brought me here, well, and my wife. Next, our band is going to do another presentation for us. Before we end the official portion of our ceremony today, I'd like to extend some special thanks I couldn't have pulled this off without the help of many people. Everyone that I approached was more than willing to step forward and assist me with planning and setting everything up. I want to start with Benito. He's been instrumental. He immediately stepped forward and offered to help. I want to thank my wife, Donna, sitting over here. She volunteered and she kept reminding me, sweetie, this is only a part-time job. You putting in a lot of time. But again, we had to get the mission accomplished. Also, where's my right hand? Cheyenne is a work study in the VA program, and she was another one. She stepped forward, and just last night she texted me. She said, I want to make this great. Thank you, Cheyenne. You did a great job. You made it good. Okay, this again ends our official portion of the ceremony. We have additional food and beverages in the back. Pizza, wings, and sandwiches donated by Subway, Sodexo prepared, and also Domino's Pizza. Did everyone receive a red ticket when they came in? Okay. We have door prizes, additional items that were donated by our local businesses. So we'll start drawing for the door prizes shortly. Thanks again, everyone, for attending. Again, Chancellor Caldwell, Dr. Snyder, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.